So next to our custom timeline, we're going to create a new element, which is then going to hold our duration, which has progressed so far. So for this, we're going to create a nice empty span tag, and then we're going to inject some data into it as soon as our video has then loaded. Now we're going to call this the player underscore duration. So this is going to hold exactly the same as here. We have 002, 011. We're essentially going to create a mirror copy of that, so then we can have full control over the styling and positioning and the behavior for our particular elements. So underneath our timeline, let's go ahead and change this over to the duration. And what we're essentially going to do, as soon as our video is loaded, we're going to take the duration on the video and then we're going to inject it into the DOM. So now we've got a placeholder set up, we want to create another event listener. So we have our time update, which, as we know, ticks as time goes by in the video. However, and we've already looked at this in this chapter, we have this duration change. Now this is going to have a set duration callback as well. However, we're going to change this over to set the initial duration instead. So let's go ahead and create this initial duration function. I'm going to do that above here. We can say set initial duration and create a nice arrow function. Now for this, we are going to have the event object. What we can do is console.log e.target, and we can then look at that duration property. Now above, we do have this duration. So we'll just comment this out for now, save things out and have a look in our console. So here we have 11.8654. So what we want to do is essentially inject this piece of data into the DOM and display something like we have here. So there are two parts to this. There are calculating the total duration, so 11, which we already have here, but we need to then parse it into a particular format where we have 0 and the colon. So we want to essentially convert this over to minutes and seconds. And similarly, as the timer updates and the video keeps playing, we want to then keep injecting every time our time update function to then set the left-hand value. So essentially what we want to achieve is, if we take our duration, we want to inject this into our template. So we can say duration, and I'm just going to use the inner text. We can use inner HTML if you'd like. And we then want to inject that particular content. So all videos begin at 00, and then we're going to say out of, and then we want to, of course, set the current duration. So if I save this out, we can then see we have 000. So what we need to do is both set this time as the video updates and the total time. So how do we go about getting the total time and converting it over? So essentially we want to take this duration value and then change it over to minutes and seconds. Now for this, I'm going to create a new function. We're going to call this the get time. This then will accept the duration as the argument, and it's going to then return us a formatted string of minutes and seconds. So the console log event.target duration, we're in fact going to change to a get time call, and we'll log this out as we build it so we can see exactly what's happening. So this gives us the duration, and we're going to then log the return value, which will ultimately then set inside of here. Now at the moment, this duration variable is 11.86. So what I'm going to do is say console.log and then do duration dot to fixed. So when we save this out, this then rounds the value up to, in our case, 12, which is slightly different to the native implementation. But as we can see from just logging the duration itself, it is on the higher end of the number 11 at 0.86. So what we can do is change this over to just a rounded number. So instead of just logging this out, we're going to change this into a constant. We're going to call this the time. We then want to construct the minutes, and we also want to construct the seconds. And then what we're essentially going to do is return a string, which gives us the minutes and then the seconds. So we can then pass in the seconds and the minutes. So this is the final line of code which is going to return us, which we can then go ahead and set inside our inner text. So we need to take care of this const of minutes and the const of seconds. Now to convert this into minutes, what we in fact need to do is perform some calculations. So first things first, I'm going to change this to a parse integer, because you can see that this is in fact black text, which means that it is in fact a string and not a number. So this converts our time nicely over to a number. we can then say that we want to take the time and simply just divide it by 60. With the seconds, we can say time and then modulus and then 60. So you can see here that we have 0.2 and then 12 seconds. So in fact, what we need to do here is call a parse integer. This is then going to get rid of any decimal places. We have something like this, 0 and then 12. Now we don't really need to worry about it with our seconds. However, one thing I want to do is interpolate these values and then actually use a new string method called pad start. So here we're going to say parse int, and we're going to say pad start with a value of 2 and then 0. So if you take a look in the console, instead of 012, we're going to have 0012 to make it a bit more official like we've done down here. So this will add a leading 0 at all times rather than it being 712. This also stops the numbers jumping around the screen. Similarly, for our seconds, we're also going to interpolate that value and use the exact same method. So we can say pad start 2 and then 0. Now at the moment we have 12 seconds, so it's actually not going to add a leading 0. So this demonstrates what it does or doesn't do. If there are 2 digits, it's not going to add that leading 0. Otherwise, it's just going to leave the number as is. So now our set initial duration has come back. We know that we can see 12 seconds. Instead of just simply logging the get time call, we're going to say const total duration equals, and then that get time value. We can then take our total duration and then simply append it inside our string. Let's hit save and see what it gives us. So you can see here that we have 00 and then 012. However, at the moment when we start to hit play, this updates. However, our custom displaying of the real-time duration does not update. There's also one thing that I want to add to our style sheet, and that is player __ duration. We can then just simply give that a width of 100 pixels. So we can then save this out and we have it all nicely formatted on one line. And because we're using flex, this then just alters the width of our custom timeline scrubber. So the next piece, every time our time is updated, we now need to hook in and start updating this side. Now we could split these into 2 variables and then update them independently, but I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. It doesn't really matter for this as it's just a single string anyway. So every time our time update event fires, we then have our set duration, which is then called. So this is where we need to start doing some similar logic to here and inject that time. So when we set the initial duration, we know that this is going to be 0. So it doesn't really matter what that initial value is. However, on this side, we need to update the inner text every single time it changes. So it's going to be a little bit more complex for this scenario. Now we've kind of done this already. We have this event.target.current time, which then gives us the amount of seconds which have progressed. So we can use our existing get time variable because duration is also in seconds and current time is always in seconds. So we can in fact reuse our get time function and get a nicely formatted string back with those minutes and seconds. So we're going to say the current duration is then the return value of our get time call. We can pass in event.target.current time. So every single time our set duration is then updated, we're going to get a new value back. So the current duration, if we then interpolate that string, pass the value in, let's see what we get at the moment. This is obviously going to eradicate our existing on the right-hand side, but you can see that we have 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up until 11. So now it means that we just need to simply add the total duration to the end of our video. So when we refresh, you can see that we have 12 seconds. So instead of just locking our total duration here, I'm in fact going to change this over to a let variable so that we can access it up here, which means that above we can say let total duration and just simply leave it empty for now. And when our set initial duration gets called, we then override it, set our 0 value with the total duration for the video, and every time we then go to update the current duration, we're updating one side and we need to then pass in the total duration on the other side. So when we go and hit play, you can see that we have our number on the left, which is continuously updating, and then we have the total duration on the right-hand side. And there you have it. So that is essentially how we can create our own custom timeline to sync the media progress to this input type range, as well as syncing this real-time duration, which is then occurring as the video is then playing. I think you'll agree that this is quite a nice way to do things. And we can have now full control over the display of our elements. Now you'll notice as well, when we get to the end, we don't actually reset our video. So what I'm going to do is add back this ended, and we're then going to call our stop media function. So let's do it one more time. We'll hit play, we'll see it go to the end. Now our stop media function, if you remember, we've already composed, and it basically sets it back to the end as soon as we hit stop, or the video reaches the end like so. We can, of course, press play and then hit stop, and it does the exact same thing. Or when it gets to the end, we then call that stop media. And as we'd expect, it's quite a nice behavior to then go back to the beginning of the video. So then the user can then start all over again. So that's it for this lesson. There's quite a lot that we have, in fact, covered. The logic in here is a bit more complex. Hopefully, I've broken it down in a nice, simple way for us to then start managing and dealing with these APIs. And you can see that it's quite a nice API. It's quite simple. We have these current times and the durations, and we can then do anything we like based on some of the events that we get given through the media object and some of our own custom controls.